Welcome to the Family Law Channel. My name is Scott Drake. My guest is the host of the Family Law Channel, retired Judge Eugene Hyman, Superior Court, Santa Clara, California. Judge Hyman, good to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about an ad campaign that was put together by the Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board and recently pulled. The ad campaign showed a profound link between binge drinking and rape of females. And, feminist organizations saw this, activists saw this, and they cried that, well, we're blaming victims now, and then the ad campaign has been pulled. But the point we're trying to make today here is that this is a topic that needs to be discussed, is what I'm getting from you, Judge, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, why are women concerned about mentioning alcohol and drugs in sexual assault cases or domestic violence and things like that? Does it, prejudice the case in some way?
Well, first of all, I think their concerns are legitimate concerns.
Yeah.
I certainly understand why they are concerned about certain kinds of ads. Number one, there's a difference between ads that say, look, perpetrators have to take responsibility for their actions, and nothing that they do with respect to alcohol or other drugs relieves them of that responsibility, even if their victims have been using alcohol or other drugs. Being unconscious is not the same thing as giving consent to an intimate relationship, and there needs to be a conscious understanding of that, what is an obvious principle, but unfortunately doesn't always appear to be that way. So their concern is legitimate. So what to do about it? Number one, it's basically, I think, one of education. That is, the fact that they have this concern and that there is legitimacy to it means that judges, juries, police, probation, people in the criminal justice system have to be educated in terms of one's responsibilities. And the fact that women, if they use substances, that does not mean that they are somehow responsible for the violence that is visited upon them. They have a victim has no responsibility.
Right.
That belongs to the perpetrator.
If you, in your past experience in domestic violence cases, for example, talk about how you felt when a victim said that, yes, we had been drinking at that time, which is probably not that uncommon. In fact, it's probably very common. Did that change the way that you looked at the person in any way?
No, it didn't change how I did, but the reality is that there is a possibility, if not handled correctly, that a jury might. So this is something that has to be addressed during jury selection in terms of whether or not prospective jurors have an open mind. But having said that, there's also a concern in terms of the judge has to maintain neutrality during the jury selection process. So the questioning has to be done very carefully and skillfully so as not to somehow impart your personal feelings on them. I mean, your responsibility is to make sure that they're open-minded, and the fact that if a victim had in fact been using alcohol or other drugs, that they would not automatically be dismissive of her testimony or not. And that needs to be done. But it also needs to be done by prosecutors, and I was somewhat amazed at times in terms of how inartful prosecutors were in terms of questioning, because if the judge doesn't do it, then the prosecutor needs to do it. My personal preference would be for the judge to do it, because I think a judge can do it better in a more neutral way than a prosecutor, because after all, a prosecutor is an advocate just like a defense attorney is. And I was somewhat surprised in terms of how inartful some attorneys are with respect to addressing this issue. And it needs to be addressed, and it can be addressed, I think, in a neutral way. And my personal experience was that if done correctly, people who initially expressed a prejudice could understand the role that alcohol should play, and that is that they would need to keep an open mind and evaluate the testimony of everyone. and then do their job, which is to judge credibility, which is not an easy job. I understand that, but it's what they're there for. It's what the judge is there for if it's a court trial, and it needs to be done.
And we're talking about a study from the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs. It followed hundreds of young women, teenagers, especially through their first year of college, and found a direct correlation between binge drinking and their likelihood of being victims of sexual assault, which is something, as the parent of a teen daughter, I've preached before, you do not want to be out of control, and you certainly don't want to be drinking anyway because you're not 21. It's a hard thing to get your head around that if someone has been drinking and they're not in control. I'm sure you've seen in some cases where they're often blamed for what happened to them, and I'm sure sometimes there have been cases where someone who actually has committed assault has actually gotten off because of it.
Absolutely. And the concern isn't just with respect to the front end, with respect to adjudication in terms of responsibility. It's also at the back end. So assuming hypothetically that a defendant has been found guilty, responsible for domestic violence or a sexual assault where alcohol or other drugs has been involved, what happens with respect to the intervention? And unfortunately, too often the intervention doesn't address the substance abuse issues. It just talks in terms of the power control and the violence issues, which are paramount. Obviously, the substance abuse issues does not excuse the violence issues, but if you're not addressing the substance abuse issues, sometimes the message with respect to the power and control can't come across either, and therefore this is an important issue. And unfortunately, while I understand why, too many programs, in my view, don't address the substance abuse issue, which is equally important as the power and control issue.
Well, education is the answer, it looks like, and we appreciate you doing the best that you can to educate people, Judge Hyman. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is the Family Law Channel here on the Legal Broadcast Network.